system, so you install .NET Framework over the operating system, and that classifies the development as a platform over the operating system. Operating system is typically a unmanaged development, native development, working typically in C, C++. Now, there is no other viable solution today. .NET is to make the things simple, like Java. So it's a framework that sits on the top of the OS that abstracts the OS and make it portable. There are other implementations of the .NET framework on other platforms, for example, on Linux, that allow to develop in one environment and bring your application on another platform. I bring many slides, but I have collected them just to give you and have some information that you can use. The entire .NET framework is something like this. We have the operating system, we have real runtime that is known as a common language runtime. That is what we can call the Java virtual machine in a Java environment. So the runtime that abstract the real machine in this managed environment. Then we have a base class library that is a set of standard libraries: file management, data management, standard types, string, integers, doubles, Boolean, are all implemented as a base class library. Then you have ADO.NET, that is the standard container on which in .NET Framework there is the data access to the databases. And LinkU is a language integrated query, is the now standard way to query and operates with data. That is a fluent interface that allows to query data sources in a host language, so you don't have to write, for example, you will see tomorrow with Ernie, instead of writing SQL code to access a database, you can write a LinkU query in a host language, for example C#, and then there is something that translates this query in C# in a query on the database. Then you have some other libraries, WCF, that is a communication framework, WWF, that is a workflow, ASP.NET sits on and all of this. So if you want to develop with ASP.NET, you have to know data access, the base class library, the common language runtime. And then you have the other application framework, Windows Form, Windows Presentation Foundation, Silverlight, and so on. So it's a lot of things to know. But there is one feature that is important that must convince you to use .NET Framework, that the entire stack is common for all the environments, ASP.NET, Windows Form, WPF, Silverlight, and for every language, C#, VB.NET, F#, and other languages written on the .NET Framework. So the string type, for example, or the data access, or how you write a form is the same for every language you use. Or if you want to read a file, write a file, you write this file in the same way in ASP.NET, Windows Form, Silverlight, and so on. So one environment, one framework for every kind of application you want to write. Okay, this is quite important. Today you are already you can already find on internet the announce of Windows 8. that expands this diagram in a new revolutionary way. But we have to see what Microsoft wants to do on the next years, how this framework will change, will adapt on the changed situation. Be sure that Windows 8 server, not client, not Metro, not desktop or mobile, okay, or in application, not websites or web application, mobile, desktop, something will change, something will evolve, something will adapt. On the server side, the scenario is much more stable. On Windows 8, they say, okay, develop a Windows 8 application in HTML5, not thinking about on web design. Write HTML5 Windows 8 application on Windows RT, that is the new runtime on Windows 8. On the server side, you continue to develop on this stack. There are no information on a changed way to develop web application. On the client, they are saying, oh, C++ is a new tool to develop Windows 8 application. On the server side, they are not saying use C++. You can write server-side application, but they are not pushing server-side Windows C++ web application. So on the server side, it is more, at the moment, is more conservative. And from my experience, for example, Windows Form is the first library for desktop application on the .NET Framework since 2002, when .NET Framework 1.0 was created. And WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation, was born on 2007, about 5 years ago, and today we have a very slow acceptance of this technology. There is no common to develop on desktop in WPF. It's normal for companies, in local companies, to continue developing on Windows Form instead of bridging the gap on WPF. And as for mobile application that is common today, we have a lot of platforms, Android, iOS, Silverlight for Windows Phone. On the next we have HTML5. Every year there is a new framework to develop native application for the device. Now we cannot say more desktop application. We say native application for the device, because we can have desktop application but for tablet, and tablet will become a common device for daily operation in a company. Check the production in a production company, not with a laptop but with a tablet. How you develop an application? You have native application, but the tablet is Windows 8 with October 26, or iOS, or Android, or something. But if you decide that your application is a web application, so you choose web tools, you have a most guided and more mature scenario. You have server-side components, you have client-side components that we'll see, and you have seen in the last 2 days. You have learned about HTML5, CSS3. You have learned yesterday, I think, JavaScript and jQuery. That are now a very mature scenario to develop web application. And MVC, as we will see, has evolved in about 3 years when MVC has born on 2009, has evolved rapidly to adapt to this new scenario. So, making the investment on .NET Framework is quite useful if you want to make a server-side development on .NET Framework, to make also development if you want Silverlight, WPF if you need on another device. But then you expose your user interface in HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript. Okay? That works in a standard browser. Firefox, Chrome, Explorer 9. 9 or more. Because jQuery 2, I have read yesterday that jQuery 2.0 will not support Internet Explorer under 9, because only Internet Explorer 9 support quite completely HTML5 and CSS3 specification. So this is quite considered. Just to see how it looks, if you have not seen how to develop in C# and .NET Framework, you can you have this is Visual Studio. You can download Visual Studio Express, that is Visual C# Express, Visual Basic Express, Visual Web Developer, that are free separated tools in the Express edition that are free but are not integrated. C# and VB for desktop application, Web Developer for web application, where you can develop in C# and VB. But the code is quite the same. You have a new project, for example, Windows Console application or WPF application. Quite long. This is not a developer machine. WPF application is a desktop application. It shares the same code to Silverlight application that are the rich application hosted into a browser. But you have desktop application in which you develop. Okay, WPF has a special markup code that is known as XAML. But what is important for me, they say, okay, here you have C# code, but it seems like Java. It has a syntax that is quite Java, but has important evolution on the language respect of the Java language. But if I create a web application and I say web application, the old web form application, that is the technology born in 2002 with .NET Framework 1.0, today with .NET Framework 4.5 is on the 4.5 version. So it's the first web framework for .NET that is continuously evolved and supported. To say that behind ASPX pages there is C# code, the same C# code. So .NET Framework under the entire frameworks, application framework, so ASP.NET and so on. I remember in 2001 when I went in Copenhagen, in which there was the first public presentation of .NET Framework. University allowed me to go in Copenhagen to have a 3 days presentation on Visual Studio. And I remember that the presentation were something like this. Oh, you see, new application and you have a template ready. So you can click F5, start, and you have an application running. Okay, but there was one feature specifically for web development. I show you for WPF application, but also for the old, in 2002, the old VB6 application. In that time, 2001, we developed with COM components and Visual Basic 6. But it is still supported today, not 10 years after, from Microsoft. And Microsoft will support until 2018, I think. The companies have a lot of code to change, and the company don't want to change the code. Application is running, okay, don't touch it. But in 2002, the most wonderful thing of VB6 development that was implemented on the top of the .NET frameworks, so Windows Form, ASP.NET, but also on WPF, was this. Oh, nice, toolbox, drag and drop, double click, hop, you have an event handler. In 2002, the most important paradigm in development was event programming, was visual programming. Designer, drag and drop, define a component, double click, define a handler, click, answer to an event, write the code. The time which was oh sorry, if you do the same thing on WPF on ASP.NET is the same, drag and drop, double click. The entire framework in ASP.NET is written around this mechanism. Don't look on the web code. Don't think you are in a web application. Oh, sorry. Don't think you are in a web environment. Don't think you are in an HTTP protocol. Don't think you are on a HTTP stateless protocol. Don't think what is get and post. Don't think HTML. Don't think you are in first Firefox. Probably Netscape Communicator was on the last browser. Don't think you are in Internet Explorer 5. Don't think in Opera was just starting. Don't think in Chrome that did not exist in 2002. Okay? Don't consider you are in a web environment. Become a web developer reusing your entire experience as a VB6 developer. This was a message in 2002, but the first work was done by Scott Guthrie in 1998. The person that is Vice President of entire Visual Studio Web Solution, now Azure Development, has entered in Microsoft in 1997, and the first thing he had created is the ASP.NET framework of the .NET. Okay, this was the paradigm of web development in 2002 over the .NET framework. Event-driven web development renews your VB6 experience on the web. Rapid development, because the vision was a toolbox, drag and drop, write what you draw, what you want to see, execute. Rich controls and tools. Which were a control? A button, for example, a text box. But a control, a server-side .NET web control, that was something that would abstract what is really written on the browser. Because in 2001, HTML4, or 3, or the evolving 4, were something like the serial port communication, a specification that every producer of a browser can implement as he wants. Is quite a guideline, but not a strict specification of a language. So everyone could implement the rendering of the HTML code as he wants. So the problem was, at that time, if you write HTML, every HTML you write is specific for a specific browser. So one of the features of web form was abstract the client-side code to ensure that what you see in every browser is quite the same. Don't think about specific. And then the technology marvelous things about the ASP.NET web form were postbacks and viewstate. Postback was the mechanism under event-driven programming. Every click is not an anchor, but typically a JavaScript client-side event that make underneath a postback, so a post with data to have a client-side, a server-side send, update of the server-side state, and then again with the most marvelous view state back on the clients. View state is the tool with which ASP web form give you the feeling that the web programming is stateful. Desktop application is stateful because you run the application, the memory contains your application, contains your data. Memory is not climbed from other one because the machine is yours. So the data are always here. You can access that data every time, when you want. On the web is not in this way. HTTP is stateless. So every request and response is separated from the other request. The statefulness of an application is created in HTTP application thanks to in two ways: cookies, which are data stored in the HTTP request and response, on web form where the view state, that is a hidden value in a form that is present in every web client application, that contains the entire state of what you have on the server side. So if you don't learn to manage how to handle this view state, you have pages, if you think of the grids, every item in the grid as a state that is rendered as a grid, so you have the markup that show you as a grid and the information in the view state. So typically, view state where with no control, and so you have long responses, slow application. And at that time we had no ADSL connection like today, and today in Italy it's not so good connection, but 10 years ago was not worst. So, well, for migrate, scalable, not so much scalable. On that, in 2002, Google was in his third year, was just growing. Facebook was not present, so we have not the perception of what is a big web application can be. On the 2002, there was no the fear, the need continuously of scalable applications. Scalable application means application that can handle a growing request, a growing user request. You have success, more users use your application must have to handle a lot of requests. How do you scale? You have a bigger machine. The experience show you that big one machine that handles all the requests from all your users is quite a mission critical machine that also costs a lot. Everything that is difficult costs. Everything you measure as difficulties, you measure in money. So, big machine is not so just a big machine, but big, redundant, energy-consuming, administrative consuming. How do you make a backup? How do you start that machine? You hang the application, you have to restart the entire machine. It's not possible. So today you have to think about other scalability. What you say, for example, scale-out scalability. Have a front of massive scale-out application. Machines, you have 10 users, 100 users, you have one machine. You have 1,000 users, you put 10 machines, because it 10 machine and the user access to one. He doesn't know how many machines, just one, with some logic, round-robin logic or something like this. Okay, we have, today we speak more explicitly of scalability. Abstraction are not very abstracted, difficult to test. More application is quite difficult, as the application grow, so it's more probably that you change from one part and something does not work in another part. So there is a documentation how you handle the entire project. You have to introduce what we call automatic tests. So that ensure that some piece of code do every time we do a rebuild of application because we have done an update, does always the same thing. But you cannot, as a person, okay, I have to make again test 1, 2, 3, 4, because today we have test 1,000. You cannot every release test manually every feature. So you have automatic test. Web form, for its nature, it's quite difficult to test. Lack control over markup. Another things you have learned in these 2 days, the last 2 days, one important thing, that what you call web application are more and more importantly, again, in 2002 you say, websites and web application. Website as a presentation site with just probably static markup, just to present content. And then web application, in which the content is dynamic, because, for example, a table is the result of a query on the database. Okay? With not so nice presentation, because the important is the data. Today, also web application to present data is important how to present. It's important to use colors. It's important to use nice graphics. It's important to support new devices. For example, accessing your web application from a mobile device, the phone, the smartphone, the tablet, the television. You have new problems. On 2002, you can think about a fixed size screen. In 2002, we have 15 inches, 17 inches, probably some 19 inches, but every time the fixed, quite fixed resolution. Today we have many resolution, multi-monitor on the application. You have smartphone, you have portrait and landscape, you have many tablets. So your application must be responsive and adapted to the device. So how do you show your application in a full HD resolution, 1920 dots? Or how do you show your application on a tablet that is 1000 dots? The half resolution in a third of a size. Retina display of the iPad is not so common today. Probably in about 5 years we will have Retina display in every device, but it's smartphone probably has continue to have a smaller resolution. Okay, so what has changed is that is no more of a programmer the control of the layout of the graphics. You have to divide from designer from the developer. You cannot develop a web application without thinking about graphics, about how the site it looks. Just to show you, in application we have one application that we are using in my company is we are using, for example, this framework that is an HTML5 CSS3 framework. That is a CSS3 CSS that that gives you a ready CSS with these things. For example, if you want to have a website, a fluid website, you have already the entire things. You have the layout, you have the buttons, you have the styles, you have the toolbar, you have the drop-downs already, but nice controls that they adapt on every device. The CSS support desktop browser, but also mobile browser. This is extreme in the sense of if you have no a web designer that can help you on writing your application, you have some help to make a nice web application. Okay, this is a quite basic, old-style web application with a very simple layout, while this is quite rich. All the entire is expressed in terms of classes, of CSS classes, entirely. CSS classes and then JavaScript plugins that works with drop-downs, navigations, drop-down, tooltips. Over, carousel, ready. You cannot write web application without using something like this. This is Twitter Bootstrap. That is a framework on which Twitter is written, and there are many applications that are written in the same framework. For example, SlideShare, you see that is the same. And then you can develop customer application. This is one application in the company where I work that is written in the same with the same framework. You see that? Okay, no data, sorry, but you have the same, always the same component, nice component. Okay? So, having the control of the markup is quite important. One of the things that was fixed in ASP.NET 4 was the IDs. jQuery works on ID. Pound ID is a typical query you make in jQuery. Until ASP.NET 4, the ID of tags in ASP.NET generated markup were automatically calculated, so you had no control on the ID of the markup. So it was impossible to add a markup by ID, for example. Quite impossible. So, if you want to develop under web on the server side, what you need? You need tight control over markup. You have to see explicit the markup that is generated on the client side. You cannot abstract, because today, we have a strong HTML5 specification. We have a CSS3 strong specification. We have rich browser, Explorer 9, Firefox, and Chrome, that are the three main browsers, that render the same web page in quite the same. We can say that Chrome and Firefox are quite the same. Explorer is a little bit back. We hope that Explorer 10 will solve entirely the gap, will fill the gap. But now you can control the markup and have, you are sure that the page will be presented in the same way. And then you also can have some framework you can take from the community to implement your web application. Okay, leverage the benefits of ASP.NET. Single responsibility principle, that is a feature that is given on domain-driven design, we will see later. Convention over configuration is one principle that we have learned from Ruby on Rails, for example. Don't express if the rule is clear. Don't map. Don't specify that this field goes in this tag is the field and the tag has the same name. Don't express that this URL matched on this component is the URL and the components are the same. Convention is this name the name of the tag is the same name of the property of the object. This is convention over configuration. Don't express a rule before express a specific mapping between components. URL routing, we will see later. SEO, search engine optimization. When you work, it's quite unuseful. You write a web application that is a public application. You have a web application that generates code on the server side, okay? But fill the page with server-side data. But that data must be indexed because we want to find our application on Google. We cannot write also, not only standard HTML5, but we have to select some ways to write HTML5 because the crawler from Google can index and evaluate a lot our web application if we want that our application go up in the search result. So, search engine optimization is quite important in web design and is important in our web application. If we want the post, the page from Facebook that is a web application, that because the parts of the page are created server-side from some queries in some database, to be searched by Google, find our name in Google, the page must be constructed in some way. And the URL cannot be, okay, www.facebook.com/profile.aspx. Person ID equal 11195 or what? No, the nice feature, the SEO-friendly URL is framework.com/marco.python. Is name.subname is a readable URL, not an unreadable URL, but explicit the application nature of a website. You have to express your web application just like a resource, just like a website. Oh, design patterns. You know what are design patterns? Design patterns are these. Is this book. How to write maintainable code. Because there is one thing important that I have not told you, sorry. I have written somewhere and I have to discover it. Okay, I write here. When you write code, you have to think that your application, your work, does not stop when the application is released. Now, when you release the application, you finish to have your nice time working. because you start having problems, because users start using your application. So your application, your user will start to find your bugs. And then your office master, how do you say? Oh, okay. In your office, your customer, your boss will, oh, nice job! Oh, we want to make something. One more thing, as Steve Jobs said. One more thing. We can make one more thing. Where? How? When do you need this thing? Oh, yesterday. When you will go in real world, what the requests you receive are for yesterday. So you will have no time. So you will not have time to understand. Oh, okay. Wait. Okay, we can make analysis. Then we can make prototyping. Then we develop. When we test, when we release, what we call the waterfall development. No. For yesterday. So you have to create an agile way of working. Rapid development. Rapid request response. And if you have a bug, because you will have bugs, you will never have no bug application. If you have created also the tests, but you have missed one test, and then you will have a customer that will find your bug. How much time? In how much time you will discover where the bug is? So you have to develop with maintenance in mind. Maintenance for corrections and for evolution. Correction of the bugs, evolution of the requests. Fast. So design for maintainability must be, design maintainability is always a fight design for performance. If you think about performance, is the worst thing you can implement if you want an application maintainable. You have to start on maintainability because you have to respond fast to a request from your customer, from your user. When you have a maintainable project, you can have a fast project because you can concentrate on specific items that are time-consuming, but you maintain the maintainability. You ensure the maintainability. If you look only on performance, the request must be a solved request in terms of a request from web. The web page must load in Snap. If you concentrate on this, you probably will have a very low maintainability of the code. So changing something will be a mess. Okay? So maintainability must be a way of working in which you introduce many things. What you call application lifecycle management. So a method of working. You guide your development team with some rules. One rule is Agile rules that comes from something like Kanban. That is a way of working that the Japanese use. Production controlled in a very specific way. You have the tickets, the work items, you call user stories. Every user story fits on a ticket and you have an advancement in development. You have many items that work quite independent, I hope. Because if you connect these items each other, you have a waterfall development that has a long time. You cannot work in today without having application lifecycle management in mind, and working with tools like, for example, in my case, Team Foundation Server. You cannot work without unit testing. You have to make automatic test that runs on your code. For example, if I think that I have a list, I add an item, I must be sure that if I were developing a list component, every time I add an item list empty, add an item, I ensure that after adding an item, the count of the element is 1. You see, assert are equal 1 with comma count. This is a very simple assertion, but you can think a unit testing project that is thousands of this code that is executed after every rebuild of a code. And if one test fails, you cannot release your code. But also, your code must be testable. You have to write code to insert this test. You can test your components. You can test automatically that component. Design patterns, where I started, is something like this. Is a set of patterns, a set of how you write code. In university, we stop on object orientation, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism. But this is just having the brick. But now you have to understand how you can combine the bricks to build a wall. And the way we build the walls is this set of rules, a set of patterns. Because that patterns help you to write a maintainable, reusable, testable code. Web form, just to say, why writing
we should start from the web project.
Okay, but just to make things simple, how do you test that every time I click on the button you see the now? You can't. Why? Because you have mixed the code that makes the business logic, datetime, with a presentation on the back. The only way you can test the code is just browsing. And look in the HTML code and try finding a string presented string, so changed in the format in your presentation. For example, if you are testing the page for Italian or for English, you have a difference. How do you test that is now? You have to separate this. You cannot test everything. On the UI, there are some limits. But for example, you can say that you write what you write. You write a new project and you say glass fiber. You say IEL public time of okay. Reference the project. And then okay. Well, what you can do in this way? Okay. What you have in this way? You have that you can create a new project that is a test project. Will you test heartbeat? Okay. We make the project as a reference here and say set equal, we have R okay. Part of your application, part that you mixed in the same code, you have separated. For example, in one distributable library that separated business logic with your presentation logic. So you can reference your business logic in a test project and say, okay, run a test. Or just saying that after it is okay. Fail. Testing is part of your analysis, not development. Then your test all the logic in your code, and you cannot release a code if test is correct. Think about that stupid thing. Think that your application must think in Greenwich Mean Time. You normalize your data because in international data you store every daytime in how do you say UTC time. But you don't convert the time in UTC. This simple thing is quite useful. Don't use daytime, not today, but encapsulate today in a heartbeat method. We are simple to say, okay, what time is it? Daytime, not now. No, in your application is UTC time now. So, okay. Every time you spend in testing, every time you spend on design, every time you spend on analysis, you save time many times on your customer. So many customers will not use a bug application. MVC, we have not spoken about MVC, but MVC keeps all these things in mind. Develop HTML5 application, work with designer, work in a testable project, work with design patterns in mind, work with maintainability in mind, work with designer development fight, typical fight. Also because you have some tools that are specific for the designer over the developer. Okay? MVC is just on the top of many items. It's not just a technology, but it's a way of working. Okay? We move the lab?
Yeah, we can move that. The lab is on fourth floor in our dorms. So it's in the common room of our dorms. So we can move there. There will be like 25 or 30 power plugs. So you can take the laptops and we can start.
Okay, we're starting well.
Yeah.
/MVC/MVC3, you have the installer. You use the installer because if you go with web platform, you take. Okay, so you can install the installer. You have 21 megabytes of installation. If you have Visual Studio 2012, that is in RC version, you have MVC4 that is already available also for 2010, but we can use MVC3 also because the new template with MVC4 is quite heavy. You can use 2008. Okay, you can also download MVC3 because I think it works. But also, many things we will see runs also on MVC2. But everyone with MVC2 can upgrade to MVC3. Not so for MVC4 because MVC4 is for .NET 4 for 5. So 2010, 2012. So you can, if you can install, download it because it takes a lot to install. To download, no, it's 21 megabytes, but to install is quite long. Okay, if you have MVC2, you will use many things. MVC3 implements nicely all the Ajax integration, so JSON serialization and something like this to have a more effective Ajax experience. But as a server-side development, MVC2 is enough. Just to make the things motivating, this game, this is a game I have developed at the beginning of the year is a flash game. But the entire infrastructure is ASP.NET free. The component, I have no connection, but the component don't use internet, don't access, but every information is a local application, but also when you play, you see that I start the game, so that I play just a bit. Okay. You see that the entire game show information connecting continuously with the server. You see that we have a data, level 1, download all the scores. The backend is completely JavaScript, completely ASP.NET. Every interaction with the data, with the network, is not directly connection, but are JavaScript callbacks, local, that make AJAX call to the server. And then, for example, if there is a relationship with Facebook, the server connects to Facebook. Just to say that ASP.NET can be quite funny. Okay. Someone have installed MVC3? Install it. Okay. Okay. I start, but when I stop when you tell me that you have something installed. Okay. You can write in every .NET language you have. You can write in Visual Basic, in C#, in F#. I will use C#. Visual C# Web, you see many templates of projects you can develop. You see that we have many versions. Well, ASP.NET Web Application, that is the older web form style application. You see MVC2 that is installed with Visual Studio 2010, MVC3 that is the package you are installing, and you have already MVC4 that is in RC release. So it will be final release for the October 26 when with Windows 8 Visual Studio 2012 on October 26 there will be a revolution because we will have also Windows Phone 8, Windows Server 8. So you will have it will be a quite funny day. Okay, MVC3, we can create the MVC3 application. EESTEC blog. We can do this. When you create a MVC3 application project, you can choose Entity Project, Internet Application Project, Internet Application Project. We can use Internet Application. The difference between Internet Application and Internet Application is authentication. Internet Application is in-company application. Typically, you have an Active Directory domain, so you can authenticate the user with the currently logged Windows user on your machine. while Internet application thinks about an independent authentication support. You have probably a SQL server or other relational database on which you store user credentials. Okay? Also, if you don't need authentication. So we can choose Internet application. You see a view engine. We will see what is a view engine. If you have to start with MVC, start with Razor. If you have a web form background, start with Razor. Today, so with MVC3, not on MVC2, in MVC3 there is a new view engine. We will see what the view engine is, but it's Razor. But it's a more design-oriented view engine, so how you compose a view, what you see on the browser. ASPX is the old view engine that is obviously supported because we have many MVC applications with with ASPX in English. Then you have use HTML5 semantic markup. HTML5 introduced all new semantic. HTML5 with the introduction of CSS3, it's a big improvement because presentation is moved on CSS3. So HTML can transform itself not in a presentation language, but in a content organization language. HTML5 with div text is a presentation language. If you use HTML5 semantics, tags are no more a presentation because presentation is entirely on classes and styles attributes. Tags are to declare content. So you have specific tags for HTML5 that will be supported by fully supported HTML5 browsers, so Firefox, Chrome, and Explorer 9 and 10. You have article, navigation tags, title tags, no more div. If you use, just to see, use HTML semantic, so if you have a product today that needs to support old version, Explorer 8, or old version of Firefox or old browser, you need to use the old semantic. Else, you see that you have hidden now section, that footer, that are HTML5 semantic. Okay? If you don't support HTML5 semantic, you replace footer section here and now with div. There is no difference on rendering. There is a difference on semantics on Google Engine. If Google crawls your browser, your page, find specific content looking on text. So using HTML5 semantics is a search engine optimization more than a poor presentation information. Then you also have a specific tab for specific content, so you can query your markup in a more rich semantic way. Okay, but for simplicity, it's for us the same. At the moment, it's the same. Okay. When you create an ASP.NET MVC project, for simplicity, you have a template that is quite full. Convention over configuration is the first thing to remember. If there is a folder with the name controllers, if there is a folder with name views, it needs to have the name controllers, it has to be the name views. Okay? Models content scripts is not controllers and views are mandatory for ASP functioning. Content scripts are mandatory for Visual Studio because you update Visual Studio with NuGet, so you can install all the packages. For example, if you, okay, I have it, yes. If I say manage NuGet packages, just to say, in scripts, you see that you have jQuery 151, you have 1.11, we have 1.72, 1.812, I want Bootstrap. How do you install it? Or you can go to a site download, or go to NuGet. Tomorrow you will need Entity Framework. Accept, and you download the assemblies, so the DLLs needed to use Entity Framework. But also, if you search for jQuery, it's supposed to have a scripts folder, jQuery installed. You see, jQuery updated, content with the CSS is updated. I can install everything here. Visual Studio, not ASP.NET, requires scripts and content folders. If you change the name, it will create content and scripts, so you can make a mess having different folders for the same things. So content is for Visual Studio, okay, and scripts, content is for static content, sorry. So CSS, images, while scripts is for scripts. So if you want to jQuery or entire packages Bootstrap, copy the file inside here. Okay? Okay. Execute these things you can use on MVC2. It's the same. By now, it's the same. Okay. So, if I run the application, you have MVC application running with the standard template. Okay. You have click to add 2 empty pages. You can do log on. Okay. jQuery is not running because I have updated, references are not updated, so it's 7.2. I have updated jQuery but not the references. Okay. Home, but also home index. And I show you this, no. I show you web form application, but it's the same if you are a PHP developer. The old style web form application and PHP application works on a file-based structure of a web application. What is and how a URL is composed, how routing of URLs happens. In web form or in PHP, the physical, mainly, you can alter this, but mainly, the physical structure of the folder that contains your web application is mapped on a virtual space application. So, your folder that is this is mapped, your physical folder is mapped on a virtual folder. Virtual folder that also is the root. Okay, so your C/product/WP application 1/web application 1/about.aspx is mapped. This is the root with the URL of a host /application/ your physical structure. Okay? So you explicitly have what? You have one page explicit in URL. So you have the physical structure of your application. You have the action that happens, the code and the content that is shown. So what happened with what a web designer, a SEO engineer says? This URL is not SEO friendly because a URL with suffix, so .aspx, page that think about the execution, request and response, is not SEO friendly. These kind of URLs are not SEO friendly, and Google does not index well this kind of URLs. Okay? So, what happened in a real-world application? That you have to write your application in an old-style way, with pages. And then, every single URL you have to hide with poor rewriting. On your web server, you have to map a SEO-friendly URL with a physical URL. On the browser, you write your SEO-friendly URL. The server intercepts the URL and map it on the physical URL. Okay? So, in web pages or in PHP, you have these two phases that are quite not useful. It's difficult to handle, to manage this kind of addressing. So MVC was thought directly with SEO in mind, with routing in mind. What you see on the what you see on that browser, what you see on the URL, sorry, is an URL that is, one is not a page, so you don't have extension. Basically, there is convention over configuration on the base. How? You have, on the base MVC configuration, you have two levels, controller and index. So, the first part is a controller. You see this here, on global AS. Here you see how a URL is handled. every part after the application is parsed in this way: controller, action, ID. The first part, if exists, is a controller name. The second part, if exists, is an action name. The third part, if exists, is an ID name. If exists, because if don't exist, there is a default. Controller home, action index, ID optional. So you need always a controller name and action name, and but not an ID. What is a controller? The controller is here. On the controllers folder, there is controllers, convention of configuration. There are many classes. Each one is named something, controller, explicit. So home controller is home controller, that is an object that derives from controller. So a home controller, a class that ends with controller, that derives from controller, in the folder, so in the namespace of application dot controllers is a controller. So the name, the first name we find in the URL is a name of the class that follows this convention. Okay, first part is always this part of the name of the class in that place, always. The second part is the action. What is an action? Is a public instance, not static, and non-static, so instance, action result or derived, result type, member. An action is a public member, instance member, not static member, but returns a parameter that is a value that is action result or something derived from action result. So when you have a request, the URL is parsed with that routing rule to extract the name of the controller and the name of the action. Okay, this is a convention over configuration. Okay, I can change this configuration because I can say that other controller welcome to the other, and I say that there is a new rule that starts with and the controller name is other. For example, this is useful if I create a new application, a new version of application, and change completely the organization of the content, but because of some other application with probably permanence, reference some content with the old indexing, you can use routing and not pages to handle old requests. For example, to give a 316 response and make a redirect permanently on the new URL. But you see that you have separated the execution from a routing. You can use, you have a routing engine that also is shared with Web4 in the .NET 4 version. You can decide which addressing and then mapping in some way the request. Okay? Why is I see an error. Okay, I try other controller. You see, the routing is okay because the request is routed correctly on the correct controller or the correct action. Which is a problem is a convention over configuration. MVC does not found a file named this convention over configuration /views/other or shell/index, so the action name with all the extension is probing every extension to find the name. But what is saying this? The request, first step, is handled because I recognize the structure of the reward. Routing to the controller. The controller is a piece of code wrote in C# that makes something. What? Prepare the data for representation. The controller makes server-side work. From inputs, create a result, and then the result is presented. But is a different phase from calculation. Calculation is made on the controller, or better, you will see. Then you have to present. Where do I present? On a view. That is a file that convention over configuration is required to be found on these folders. So here is saying to us, I don't find any view to handle the presentation. So I say next right button, you see add view, index, okay. With master page, we will see what is a master page. And you see a folder in views is created with the name of a controller, and there is a view named as the action. Okay. Okay? This is VC of MVC. Model MVC means Model View Controller. The web application must be split in three parts. What is a model? What is a controller? What is a view? A controller is the controlling part, is the managing part, is the part that handles the request and calculate the result and decide who present the result. Who presents the result? The view. The view takes the result, not the calculation, and this is the big difference between MVC web application with PHP or web form application, because PHP web form application mix request, calculation, routing, and presentation in one page. Mixed. Yes, you can organize your code, but it's quite less inviting than MVC. There is one rule important. With every tool you can create maintainable code. But just a few models invites you to write maintainable code. The dark side of programming, we can say. With web pages or PHP pages, you can write bad code. With MVC, you are more invited to write better code, more maintainable code. Okay? What is a controller? A controller is a page that has actions invoked by the routing. Inside the controller, there is any code you want. For example, we can you see, we don't say what is viewback now, but message write, okay? A string, a constant string, or a stupid thing like a calculation, or file you can do this. Make some data access. For example, read the content, the textual content of a file, or tomorrow you will see access to the database with an entity framework, or with an Hibernate, with an ORM, or making select star from SQL connection or DBC connection or something like this. Okay? What is a controller? A controller is a connector between requests and responses. It's not business logic. Accessing a file, making a calculation is logic, is business logic. In this way, is more testable than ASP.NET, but is not the correct thing to do. So what is a controller? A controller is handle request, put the information inside the request into maintainable objects that are the model, pass the model to the business logic, make your computation, take a result back in the controller, and then prepare the result for visualization that is not done in the controller, but is done in the view. Okay? In fact, you see that the result is not in a layout, no, but in this view bag that is a data dictionary object, is a dynamic object, because the same thing is the first two rows instructions are the same. The data is a data dictionary object. This is the syntax introduced with .NET 4. That means that ViewBag is a dynamic interface on view data that dynamically, so at runtime, maps this member access, this property access to a key in the dictionary that has the same name. But you see, this is the calculation, not correct to be in the controller, must be put in a separated component to be testable. Okay? Invoke the component, take the result, prepare the result, put in, for example, ViewBag, and decide which is the view. Which is the view that presents the data, convention over configuration, return view. What is return view? Without any parameter. Without any parameter, the view is convention over configuration, a view which is in the folders view / name of the controller, other, / name of the action, dot, something. You see, CS HTML. What is CS HTML? Is Razor files. Razor files is a ASP, is an MVC view engine, is a MVC syntax that is a mix of HTML and host code, so C# code or VB code. You see, here is the syntax at curly braces and the code. You see that the Visual Studio Designer highlights this text that are special text for Razor. On the web format, it would be less percent major. So it's quite more compact as a syntax. But for example, for values at value, there is the editor implements, the MVC implements a special parser for pages with the mix of host code, so C# code, and markup.
Please enlarge a little bit the code.
Yeah. You see, this is Razor syntax. You have the parser, the C# parser and the HTML parser are mixed together, and they have a part, the combined parser are able to mix markup with host code without explicitly interrupting the markup code with the server-side markup code. So you see that you can mix if that is executed server-side with this one. That is executed server-side, but is response.write, open braces, view back message, the other result. Okay? It's a more designer-oriented language. You can use this if is a C# code, but is so mixed in the code that also the designer can use. While the designer is, but be careful. The designer have to make if as minimum as possible, up to 0. The designer don't have to code. Just use the data. Because is not his work calculating something. But because a programmer must be a little designer, make some help for designer, because an if can be used also for a designer. Razor syntax invite more the designer to use server-side syntax. ASP.NET web form syntax is quite difficult for a designer to use it. Okay? you have MVC3 installed? Huh? Yes? Okay. Okay, so you can create a project. You can create a project, so you can code while I write this one, so you can try directly. Create a web MVC3 application, so file, new project. Web ASP MVC3 application, call it EESTEC blog, or anything you want, it's not a problem. Everyone with Visual Studio? Okay, while some Visual Studio needs to start, we can talk about this screen. One of the pieces, application lifecycle management, unit testing, design patterns, but there is also one more thing that is your tool inside your toolbox. That is domain modeling. Today, every single data you handle in your application must be mapped, modeled inside a concept of a model, inside the domain model. What you, I hope, already know as three-tier application: presentation, logic, and data access. Tells you that there is some data that go through the layers. These data are not the result set of a database connection. Why? Because three-tier application invites you to abstract your data from your data sources. Because your application must be independent from the data source you choose. You cannot develop an application because you pretend to use SQL Server, because if you cannot, you don't need specific features of SQL Server. You can store your data, your relational data, on an Oracle database, a MySQL database. Today, we are also speaking about NoSQL databases. So your data are not organized as a relational data, but as documents, as JavaScript, as JSON data. Data are stored as a blob text. Why? Because NoSQL databases can perform operation that a relational database cannot do. Facebook has no relational database on his backend. Why? Because a relational database will tend to be one. A feature called sharding loop. On particular properties, on your concept, on your entity, you can partition your data on many instances of your data. And the system can abstract you from the physical location of the data and obtain and give you the data, because you are asking for that particular data. But for that particular data, the document is stored somewhere, but you don't have to know where. Relational database cannot do this. But I have to implement in my application a logic in which your, for example, invoice stored as a relational database that can scale in some way, or NoSQL database that can scale in another way. You have to know that it is stored on SQL Server or on RavenDB or CouchDB. No, you have to ask for an invoice and obtain an invoice as an invoice. Okay? So, your first problem is model your domain. What is an invoice? An invoice is a header that contains the customer, the supplier, the date, the number, how to sell, how to pay, how to deliver, and the body. Many rows, many entities that models the single row in invoice. How much you pay, how quantity, how much you want, which product, which code, which description, which is the unit price, which is the total price. But not a stupid, flat object array, but a domain model. So a class in an object-oriented concept, model a class with some properties and with some logic. You have to be independent. You have to have a domain that is independent from your system, from your presentation, from your application. So you, first thing, you have to model your data. You have to model your domain. You have to model your concept. So create a library of domain concept. My invoice, my order, my delivery document, my customer, my supplier. Customer and supplier are name, address, barcode, tax code, and so on, without thinking about persistence or presentation. Persistence is a role of an object relational mapping. You will see tomorrow with Ernie that we present entity framework that maps an object in memory with data on a relational database. But your application, if obtained an invoice or a blog entry from a relational database or an XML file, it's the same. I handle an object. Okay? Don't think about performance. Think on a next step about performance. First, think about maintainability. So respect at most this architecture. The application is the controller. Ask to the persistence, give me my domain, my object modeled in the domain. When I have my object, give it to a presentation or extract the information to be presented on the presentation layer. Here is the controller. But ask to the persistent, give me an object from the domain. Okay? Visual Studio? Ready? Okay. Okay. So, file, new, project. Visual C#, ASP.NET MVC Free Web Application. Give a name of EESTEC new blog. Okay. Name of a project, name of a solution. The two layers I will show you more precisely. So it's okay. EESTEC new blog, EESTEC new blog as convention. Okay? 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 Select the internet application, Razor, use HTML semantic markup. Okay? Do you have a project created? I understand. Okay? Okay, so we have to make a fake blog for EESTEC. How do we make it? Okay. You see that there is a folder that is named models. I invite you to make models on another project. You see that this is the project, this is the solution. A solution can be multi-project. Okay? For simplicity, we put on entirely on the same project. But for example, for models, I invite you to put your domain model on another project. It's quite more useful and testable. Okay. If my specification is model, create your model. Okay, which is my model? My model is add new item, in C. Oh, you can do add. Okay, we have here models, add. You see that you have class. Okay? Okay? Add new class. Class, we give you a name, blog entry. No, sorry. Okay? In models, you have a new class that is block entries. Okay? What is a block entry? Well, a block entry is a public string title get and set. So it's a property, a public property named title get and set, so you can rewrite that property types. This is true also for content. And public date time created. Okay? And also to make it simple. Model your application on the concept, not on the technology. So think about what information you are using, what concept you are using, not the fact that probably log entry will be a table on a relational database that is named log entries that has four columns. Or it can have also public string permalink. That can be the unique key that identify correctly the block entry. Whereas it's nowhere is written that a key that identifies uniquely your entity is an ID. An integer, 32 bits, 64 bits. No. Block entry on specification of a block entry of RSS of Atom protocol. You don't have an ID. Yes, you have also an ID. But one unique key for a block entry is the permalink, that all that is invariant in space and time. An URL that directly access to the post without navigation, accessing any time on the content. Okay? It's not a key that is optimized for relational database. Okay. We are not thinking about relational databases. Okay? This is domain modeling. This is the concept, not the persistent. We think always on database. Remove databases from, remove relational databases from your mind. Now SQL databases are changing this way of thinking. There is no more problems about performances on indexes, on optimized indices for searches. NoSQL database has all other way of thinking, has all other performances. Probably the access, the direct access is not, the direct scan access is not fast as relational databases. But for aggregate counts, for example, or aggregate query, NoSQL database is quite more faster respect on relational database. Okay, we have modeled that the entity. Okay, what we can do? Okay, we can say this. We put on model. It's not correct when we put on model. Okay, suppose you have to recover your stored log entries. Okay, now you have. Okay, but in a more maintainable way of thinking, what is a storage of blog posts? Is a component that gives you a blog post. It's not an access to a database. It is something that to whom you ask, give me my posts. Okay? So, which is the more maintainable thing you can tell, give me my blog post? Is somewhere an interface. iBlog. Public interface iBlog. Okay? What is an interface? An interface is something that tells you to access to your blog entries, just tell me list of blog entry, get domain modeling, domain-driven design, testability tells you that access to data sources must be abstracted by interfaces that separate the customer, the consumer of the store with the implementer of the store. Okay? The relationship is give my entries. Okay? An interface is not a class. I cannot have an implementation, an instance of an interface. I need an implementation. So, add new item, class, static blog. That implement iBlog. Okay?
Can you repeat that last step?
Yeah. I repeat. It's okay for iBlog, interface iBlog?
Yes.
Okay. I cannot have an instance of iBlog because I don't have any implementation. I need a class that implements the interface to ensure polymorphism in terms of object orientation. So, for example, I will implement models, right button, add class. Sorry, I don't fit when I do this. Okay, I create a class, I will call it static blog. As a class, I require that this class implements iBlog. Okay? Okay? The requirement of iBlog says at compile time, static blog does not implement interface member get entries. Okay. In fact, you see that you have an underscore here, a blue underscore. If you click, you have a smart tag. You click, and you see that you have implemented the face blog. Okay? Click on implement interface blog. Okay, go home. You have done. No, sorry. You have just done implemented the method, but you see that the only instruction is throw new not implemented exception. If you run this exception, not implemented. Okay? But you have the correct member declared in compliance of interface implementation. Okay? Tomorrow you will use the same content, the same application, for another implementation. Which one? Add new class, EF blog, but we implement I blog. Today we don't access to any database. We make by hand a fake blog. Tomorrow you will implement an access to a database, but you have to guarantee to have always an I blog. Okay? So, you can have static blog, EF blog, okay? Okay? Wait a moment of implementation. How do we use this interface and these two classes? In this way. Go to controller. On controllers, right button, add controller. You have a mask, controller name, default one controller, underlined, you write entries. Okay? Just make entries. Okay? Entries controller, template, and controller. You have an empty controller, okay, with index, okay, nice. Okay? How the controller, so when I would do http log EESTEC /entries /index, I want to obtain all the blog entries. Okay? Where do I obtain the blog entries? Probably I have to access to a store, because I have a persistent store. Okay. I don't have to access to a persistent store. I have to ask to something to give me the entries. What can I write? Static log add to the namespace using EESTEC. You see that if you write a word that is not a symbol, an identifier that is not in the namespace, you see that you have the smart tag click using that writes using over here. Okay, add to the local namespace. Static blog. Blog equal new static blog. Okay? Okay? And blog.dot, get entries. Okay? And you have get entries. What is wrong with this kind of code? We say that there is a tight coupling of this code, this class, with this class. With this class cannot work without static log. If I want to change how the store persists the information, I have to change my controller. And this is not good, because controller don't have any relationship, don't need any relationship with the store besides get entries. So it's not correct to write this thing. First step, not I static block, but I block it. This is a good step. is a good step. A variable declared as an interface, and I have seen to the interface an object that implements that interface. Tight coupling because this row is written inside the controller, but just this row is coupled with static block with specific implementation. This is iBlock. Okay? If I change, I can say list. Okay? If I change static block to EF block, the code is correct because this is coupled with this that is independent by this from this. Okay? This is the only coupled row. Which is the best thing to do? Is private iBlock block public and this controller iBlock block This is totally correct because the store is abstracted by an interface. So in the class there is only reference to the interface, not to specific implementation. And the specific implementation is a parameter of a controller given to as a parameter when the controller is created. Okay? This allows these have to be moved in another project, but this is quite a detail. This is a way to write code in a maintainable way. Decouple as most as you can the code. Classes and interfaces. Always reference to interfaces, not to specific implementation. In MVC, everything is abstracted by this kind of way of having never reference an instantiation directly of a component, but always separate usage of a component from the creation of a component. Always. Okay, so tomorrow you will develop EF log, and this controller will use this in the same way. Okay? For simplicity, because we don't have time to introduce inversion of control, we make this. Because to have controller with parameters, we have to make some other code. We have no time to make this thing. So at the moment, we play this with this one. But writing a code correctly passes through this thing. Creating a controller that uses some other components. The components must be specified as interfaces in the creation of a controller. Okay? Separate presentation for calculation from the coordination, that is a controller. And this is MVC. Separate the web, separate the web, so the controller and the view, from the logic. That are these kind of objects. Okay? extremely. Think extreme, better, more extreme. Because this thing helps in testing, because this component is testable, because we can use this, we can change the component, we can create a testing component, we can mock the object, so we can test, intercept the call from the host to the client to the component. We can do many, many, many things. It's a cost when you write the code the first time, but is an advantage when you maintain the code when you first release the code. Because you can substitute single pieces of code without affecting every other part of code. This is maintainability. MVC is the first step. Separate presentation from coordination, from logic, from calculation. On the calculation, we can do something like this that is modified by domain, by patterns, by domain modeling, and so on. Okay? Okay? Well, back to the static block, because there is an exception. How do we implement a static block? We make a fake block. So, list block entry. Okay, so get entries in static block is create a new list of a type of the list of block entries, return list of block entries. Okay, and then entries, add new block entry. And we can write author title block created write another block entry, no, without E, right? Okay? Static block with fake content, we add directly on the list the items. Okay, tomorrow you will perform the same thing, but accessing a database. Populate that model, block entry, accessing from a database with object to relational modeling. You will change from here to here, but the entire content is the same. Okay? Remember what I told you 2 hours ago. Well, I have not told you one thing. In Italy, companies are not so technically advanced. So don't be feared by the fact that in Italy where someone uses Visual Basic 6 or you have Internet Information Server 6 because you have a Windows 2000 server, while at home you have a copy of Windows Server 2012 with IIS 8. Okay? Company is not so advanced. So companies does not accept new technologies just because are nice, geek, and so on. New technologies are adopted by companies if there is something that the company can understand. The only thing that the company understands is money. Money, time, that is the second equation of Einstein. Money equal time. Okay? So if you use technology to save time, that means save money. Okay, that's okay. We can do it. Oh, you have to change the server to IIS 8. Okay, no. But you have to make it the same time. Okay. The main constraint of a companies are money and money. Money and time. You have to make the same thing in less time. This is just to say that if you understand this methodology, if you feel comfortable, go, because your way of thinking, your way of writing code, when you write code every day, 7 days per week, there are something that you write without looking at what you are writing, because you are writing the same thing at any time. So writing an interface, a class, inversion of control, a library for model, a library for data access, you write the same thing the same time, many times, you write more faster. These are experience in a real company that real believes on people that invest on education, on culture that can save money and time. If you specify that if you want to use a technology just because it's nice, it's not good for companies. Okay? Okay. Ready? It's okay for the static logger? Okay. Just to try. We have entries controller. We have entries. Okay. We can put on this row, press F9, so you can highlight the code. So you can test if the component gives us the entries. Okay? Okay, how we can try if entries is populated correctly. Entries. Okay, index is optional because if you don't specify, you call index action method.
I have some errors.
Okay? Enter. You see that the request is correctly routed to the correct controller. So we have a blog that is populated with static blog, correct. So if we press F11, we go into get entries. And so we have entries, that is entries count 2, okay, and we have 2 blog entries. Okay? Okay? Give me a no go, no go. No go? Okay? Okay. Okay. We were in the first page. The first page, the first content, the first action were index, home, view, home, index. You see that you have just a part of the entire HTML. So as you see that you have just a title and a content, you have a specification of a title, but you don't have the entire layout. In Razor, in MVC, there is the same concept is the equivalent concept of the master pages in web form. Automatically, you see that in views there is a file that is named underscore viewstart.cshtml that has one command, layout, that is a property of a view, equals views shared underscore layout cshtml. Okay, shared. You see that you have underscore layout. Underscore means that the file is hidden from the external. If I click on layout, I find the entire HTML document that has the meaning of a master layout for the page. You see what? You see .type HTML head body, okay. But what is important is on the view page you have an assignment to view title. Here you have a reference of view title. So view title is on hid title, so on the browser window you can have the title specified. At the same way you can repeat that information elsewhere. And you have at render body that is a command on the view that say, okay, render the content of the view that this layout, from which this layout is invoked. So in this place where there is a render body, sorry. Index selected. You start layout, go to layout, render until render page, render body. On render body, this piece is executed, is inserted, and then continue with the rest of the layout pages. Okay? So, no battery. Who have the longest battery? Because we have to. Posso? Okay. Okay, so in Razor syntax you have two main functions, main syntax. At, that is a functional invocation. So on the right of the at there is an expression. So something that returns a value. Okay? At is a functional value. While at with curly braces is an imperative value. So it's a code that executes something and probably calculates something and probably writes this something. While avoid explicit writing response.write. The best thing is use a block on the top to calculate something, server side preparing the view, and then reference all the result as functional values. Okay? These are the two main syntax on Razor, functional values and imperative values. On the layout, we find other things interesting. We see at the view bag reference to the view bag, that is this data dictionary, that is a key value store in which you put some content by name and you retrieve in the view by name. URL content always reference any URL with URL content tilde something, okay? On MVC4 this is implicit. Write everything with tilde because MVC scope the URL, expand the URL with application. So if you have a root or if you write every URL as relative with tilde, the MVC can give you the correct relative URL for your application. If you remove tilde, if you don't have tilde, it's the first slash is on the top of the host. So if you have a host slash application, it refers to the top. So referencing every script, every CSS content with tilde in URL content give you the correctness, and moving your application in any URL that MVC correct this one in the specific. Okay? So always use tilde. MVC4 gives you a step forward. You can remove URL content, just reference tilde. When he finds tilde, it makes the same thing. But in MVC3 is mandatory. Another thing is HTML partial. What is partial? Partial view is non-partial, but is the same thing. You see that at most the same thing. with one difference. Partial view has no layout. So, view rendered as partial does not reference the layout. So you can include that snippet of HTML or that part of Razor code inside another Razor code. Okay? So you have that, you can divide, for example, this is the account status. You can reuse this piece of Razor code, that is a mix of C# and HTML code, everywhere you want. Okay, without having the entire layout. Everything is HTML. HTML as a view bag is a property of the view, of the object server-side view. HTML represents what we call HTML helper, that are server-side syntax expressed into Razor syntax that helps you to write code. One important thing is this: HTML.actionLink home index home. What does this mean? This means one thing very important, that we want an action link that is labeled action and controller. I can change the rule here. I can write anything I want here, but if I specify action, control, from action and controller, I can use these rules to write the correct URL. So I can change my URL structure, my routing rules, but my view does not affect it, because I don't write one specific path, but I write the rule by which MVC rebuild the correct URL. So I can make permalinks, so I can write the rule in which I organize the content, but on HTML I can abstract on this. So HTML helper is an evolution of what in web form are controllers. Not something that abstracted from the HTML code that is generated, but abstracted from the rules of organization of your application. So action links your mainly being independent from routing rules. This is quite important. For example, having evolution of the software, new releases of the software or application, testing the application local on the developer machine while you go in production in a production server that has a different addressing. It's typical problems that these helpers help to write more maintainable code. Okay? So, if I have my entries, get back from entries, I have a controller, we have the entries, what do we have to do? We have to do this, viewBag.entries equal entries. So prepare to, if entries are the information I can give to the view, okay, prepare the information for the view. So assign the data result of the computation to a property of the view value. So viewBag.entries will be accessible from entries, from the view. Okay? Okay? I have a controller, I have prepared the data for the view, I create the view. Right button on index, add view, view name index, use a layout of master page, default, so go through view start, create, add. Okay? Okay? Well, how do I in the view? How do I use log entries? List, log entry. List blog, models, blog entry. This equal list blog models blog entry, view back, we view back that is a data dictionary, a generic data dictionary, so by a name that is a string, a value that is an object, I have to do some casts to obtain from the view bag entries, that is a dynamic property that contains an object, but I know that is a list of blog entries. I have to obtain again my typed entries, so list of EESTEC blog models blog entry. Okay? List. Okay, the syntax is quite okay, sorry. Using a generic container that refers to object, I have to do some downcast to have the type entity. Okay? Okay? Well, I have the entities. The entities are already retrieved by controller, so I know, and it doesn't matter from where they come from. How do we present these entries? I write HTML. I write a tag table tag, sorry. Okay, and then I have to write many TR tags as many entries I find in the list. Okay, so for here is the syntax, that is C# syntax into Razor syntax to make a cycle, a loop inside every entry in entries. Tag table, and for each TR for table row, and then 3 TD tracks for every item I want to see in the table. We'll back at entry.auto title created dot to short date string to show as date, not date time specific. Okay. Okay. And this is the minimum code that you have to write as HTML, because if you want to style that table, the only thing you have to do, or you have to organize to do this, is table plus something. Write as less HTML as you can, because every style must be moved into a CSS that is referenced. Table is not more a presentation tag, but is a content tag, a semantic tag. In fact, for example, Bootstrap pretend to include all the TR in T-body. Because two concepts different are the header, the body, and the footer, that are always T-row, but T-row inserted into T-body, T-header, and T-footer are 3 different concepts. So if a TR, a query, table, T-body, TR, one style, T-table, T-header, TR, one style. 3 different styles for 3 different parts of table. Understand that table is no more a representation, but it's a concept. Table of data. Also, too short date string is quite incorrect, because the decision that the date must be shown in short long is not a designer decision. Okay? I remove class because this is error. Okay? 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 No? Okay. Few minutes, but one important step, one very important step. This is what I call MVC phase 1. What is MVC phase 2? I copy the index action and I call it data and I write JSON result. I don't write this and I write JSON entries, JSON behavior, allow. Same code, same logic, referenced 2 times but not copied 2 times. How many code you have written in which by 4 times? Oh, I have 2 times, I don't time, copy and paste. You copy and paste the essential, the reference, the code, not the logic. Separate from the controller from the logic. Okay? I call not more index, but data. I change the action result in JSON result. And I return not viewback entries, but return JSON entries, JSON request allow get. Okay? Okay? This simple copy and paste, what allow? If I execute it and say entries JSON, data, sorry. You see that the browser asks me open or save, You see that the data are obtained in the JSON format automatically. MVC3 implements natively serialization and deserialization from to JSON format. Okay? Okay? Well, it works. Okay. What can I do in this way? I can copy index again. I don't write anything on a view and I call it JSON. Oh, better. Ajax. An action that does anything. Does nothing. Sorry. And I have another action that now relates to server side from data. These 2 actions are not related. Here you have the data. Here you have a static content. For example, I view Ajax. And you write table ID data stop. So if you write If you call entries/adex, you write this. Okay? No data passed as view bag, nothing. Just this table with an ID. Okay? What can I do in this case? Script type text slash. Okay? And we can create a function which is the ready function of jQuery. The function that is invoked when the entire scripts are already downloaded on the browser. Ensure that all the content is downloaded. It's a very good abstraction of an onload event of a browser DOM. Okay? And what can I do in this ready function? We can call the get JSON slash entity entries slash data of function I don't remember. Data, comma rows. On the ready function, what I call get JSON, that is a function of jQuery that makes a asynchronous call to the server. It calls another action, the action entries data, so it calls that action that returns something in JSON format. Okay? And what is a function, data rows? I don't remember the arguments now. We look at the arguments. Is the callbacks function, because getJSON is an asynchronous function that is invoked when the download, the get of action is completed. So what I have in, I don't remember, so I see the parameter, I have the JavaScript object that is the deserialization of a JSON object, of a JSON data. Okay?
So the JSON data is no longer downloadable, but is consumed by JavaScript.
Repeat, please.
Before, when you open the page, you have to download the data.
No. On the server side, here, you don't download. You already download. You download a page which contains already the data. In this case, the entire work of a view is server side, building up the page with the data. Here you have a data with an empty table. Stop. Then a client-side event on another time, on an asynchronous time, on the next time, on the you make an asynchronous call, get JSON, and get again from the same server. So there are two calls. Okay? Rows, each function. I make a loop on each item in rows. I have to check if the syntax is correct. For each item into rows, what I do is build up the row to append to the table. Okay? That is data. That is the jQuery query to retrieve the table tag ID data. Okay? So I can write, for example, send okay, I build up a row. That is a TR with free TD inside. Okay? And then what I do is okay? You have seen anything yesterday of this? No? Yes?
Not so specific.
Ah. Sorry, I suppose that you see this thing yesterday in JavaScript. This is a way, just to translate, this is a way to translate a static server-side page in a client-side Ajax-enabled web page, in which content is downloaded asynchronously by request of a client. So you can update data independently from the container. This allows you to have multiple requests inside your page without having posts, gets multiple, or to combine the data server-side. You can combine entirely server client-side. And then you can manipulate data client-side in JavaScript. So your server becomes no more a server-side calculation, but client-side. On the server you have entirely JSON action. Okay? We can try if it works. I hope. I go on Firefox that is quite comfortable on debugging. Okay, you see that on the page the request is done, so you have the get that works. Okay? So, on script, you can do this. Okay, I can make a breakpoint on the browser. So if okay, you see, I have updated here. I found the same code breakpoint. So here done the download, callback, success. Okay, I wrote data. Okay, so this is not rows but data. Okay, so this is result. Okay. I execute again, data, so I make a breakpoint here. Okay, item, you see, E is 0, is the index of the returned object, item, execute. Okay. This is a mistake of MVC3 but has a non-conformant JSON parser that write the data in that way that are milliseconds from January 1, 1970. So we have to parse that string to translate into a date, convert into a JavaScript date. But you see that with a little bit complex query, but is repeatable in every table you have, you can, on the server, transform your invocation of the data source directly to JSON objects and render the data on JSON. On JavaScript. This opens entirely new kind of application. For example, I show you. Sì. Posso mostrare una cosa. Okay, moving your mind from server to client, making some work in JavaScript and getting data from server in JSON format allows one thing more important. If your data are rendered, are combined with a presentation on the server side, you have to refresh the entire page to update what you are looking. If you have a grid, if you have a page grid, you have to click, you have to refresh the entire. If you work with JSON, you can have this experience. Page grid, add new item, sort, because all these things are written in JavaScript. And as you have now the CSS framework for layout, you have a framework as this one, that is one of the two most important frameworks for data binding, that is binding the data with a markup automatically and making this working on the client side with not so much effort. Knockout, the other big one, is Backbone, is another library, but allows things like this. And this is today the way customer want the application, making the works only server-side make the application not comfortable. You make a lot of round trips, you move a lot of data. You have difficulties to rebuild the state when you move from one page to another. If you have the same page just on the next page. If you have two or more grids on a page, how do you specify that first grid is on page 1, the second grid is on page 3, the third page is on page 5, and so on? Making these things on JavaScript, loading the entire page just once, the first time, and then interacting with the server via Ajax asynchronous call makes better application. So, what you have seen today, what you have seen yesterday, what you have seen on Monday, presentation, logic on the presentation, and logic on the server must be today have to be combined in one solution. Don't think this free information, this free concept independently. You cannot think if each one of you have to be a developer, so don't think that this is being developer, writing in C#, in PHP, in Java, in Ruby. No. Writing web application now means writing server-side code on a platform, preparing data in some way, present data in JSON format, create correct markup on a client side separated from the presentation that is represented on the CSS. Use the CSS heavily, because you don't have to write that row in red, yellow, or green, but you have to play with odd and pair rows, specifying kind of attribute in the name of a class that is specified from the CSS that is written by a colleague that is a web designer. And tomorrow you will see data access, because data access is just a component parameter you can substitute in many ways. Today, data access can be done on web services, calling another site, integrating with Facebook, with Google Maps, with something that gives you JSON data. Access to relational data sources. And you have many data sources, SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, everything you want, ODBC, JDBC. Or today we have a new kind of data storage. As I told you before, no SQL movement. Large, massive web application don't think in a relational way. Thinking about in a document unstructured way in which information are directly stored in the JSON format. So JSON is something you have to handle. NoSQL databases persist information in JSON format and can be queried with JavaScript. Because there is a column on MSDN magazine that is called the multi-paradigmatic programmer. There is no one tool for everything. Web developer needs so many tools: HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, jQuery, and jQuery not the original jQuery, because something now outperformed by CSS. So jQuery for data, not jQuery for animation, because the animation now are CSS free. On the server side, ASP.NET, but the same things can be done in Ruby, PHP, Java. But the scenario is one complete scenario. No other way today to be competitive on the market. Okay? The example and the slides I give you to Armin that will be published on the site. Okay? Thanks.